My name is Brandon Scoble, and my speech today is on the repercussions of corporal punishment in adolescence. My main claim is that corporal punishment used on adolescents is more harmful than it is helpful. Basically, this means when a parent hits their kid, such as spanking, the effects are more negative than they are positive. My secondary claims to support this are: 1, parents that use corporal punishment create aggression in their child; 2, physical punishment distracts children from learning; and 3, corporal punishment can distance the relationship between the child and the parent. I'll start off with my first supporting claim that the use of corporal punishment creates aggression in their children. When a child is hit by their parent as punishment, this makes the child believe that might makes right. Children are exposed to violence when their parents decide to use physical punishment as a reinforcement tactic. Not only is this method outdated, but has been proven to be ineffective. 94% of parents use some type of corporal punishment, like spanking, to discipline their child during the ages of 4 and 5. At that age, children are so easily influenced and molded by parental behaviors that it is common for them to practice these such behaviors they have seen. Parents are physically bigger and stronger than children. They also know more than children because their brains are fully developed and they are capable of greater self-control. When a parent tries to get their child to behave using force by hitting them, that parent is telling their child, by hitting someone who is smaller and weaker is an acceptable way of getting what you want from them. This can often lead to a child mimicking these behaviors to other children at school or even siblings. Dr. Elizabeth Gershoff, Associate Professor of Human Development at the University of Texas at Austin, conducted a meta-analysis of over 50 years of research that included more than 160,000 children. Throughout the span of her meta-analysis, she came to the conclusion that the results clearly showed that spanking, defined as open-handed hitting on the behind or extremities, was significantly linked to detrimental outcomes. She adds by stating, spanking does the opposite of what parents usually want it to do. Our research shows that spanking is linked with the same negative child outcomes as abuse, just to a slightly lesser degree. The introduction of such prominent and forceful activities at a young age increases the likelihood of aggressive behaviors in teenage and adult years to come. My second supporting claim states that physical punishment distracts children from learning from their mistakes. The use of physical punishment incites fear into the child receiving, which in most cases is the point trying to be made by the parent, making their child fear the consequences of their action. But it can have long-term effect on a child's mental health. A study done by Dr. Akemi Tomoda, a professor at the Research Center for Child Development in Canada, linked harsh corporal punishment, such as spanking, to the depletion of gray matter in a child's brain. Children who are regularly spanked recorded less gray matter in certain areas of the prefrontal cortex that have been linked to depression, addiction, and other mental health disorders. The research also found significant correlations between the amount of gray matter in these brain regions and the children's performance on an IQ test. The more gray matter you have in the decision-making thought process part of your brain, also known as the prefrontal cortex, the better your ability to evaluate rewards and consequences. In her study, children who received regular physical punishment, such as spanking, reported lower volumes of gray matter, leading to the child having less self-control. And the whole idea of the punishment in the first place is to force the child into controlling themselves and prevent them from acting out again. But by using physical punishment on the child, they're basically making their child have less self-control by making it harder for them to learn how to prevent similar situations in the future. My last supporting claim states that corporal punishment can distance the parent-child relationship. A common way that leads to this is parents can easily get carried away when using physical punishment. According to a national statistic by the United States Department of Health and Human Services in 2012, nearly 125,000 children were victims of physical abuse serious enough to warrant medical care, and 42% of those victims were under the age of 6. Adults experience higher levels of stress and frustration on a daily basis than children do. So when a parent decides to spank their child, they are susceptible to getting carried away and unintentionally harming the child. The same large meta-analysis done by Dr. Elizabeth Gershoff found that the more physical punishment a child receives, the more defiant they are towards parents and authorities, leading to a poor relationship with the child and the parent. She also states that in her 15 years of corporal punishment research, there is no study that she has ever done that found a positive consequence of spanking Most of us will stop what we are doing if someone hits us, but that does not mean we've learned why someone has hit us or what we should be doing instead, which is the real motive behind discipline. And just to reiterate my main claim, corporal punishment is not an effective method and causes more harm than it does help in adolescent years. Thank you.
Zone height. Okay, Brandon, the propositions identified at the beginning of the speech, although you make it sound like it's going to be about corporal punishment on adolescents, the body of the speech is really talking about corporal punishment, particularly on younger kids, and then maybe it has an effect on them when they are adolescent. So I think that you need to maybe be more specific in the proposition or explain that that's the link that you're going to be talking about here, because you made it sound like they were spanking 14 and 15-year-olds, and I'm not sure that that's exactly what the argument is based on. You had a good preview of what the secondary points were, and it was pretty easy to follow in the body of the speech. You tried to give good definitions at the beginning so we would know how this is being reflected. You're very dependent on the academic research, which is fine. It seems like you had a couple of good studies that you made reference to. You've got the one professor who has apparently made a career out of this, although that does also suggest a potential point of vulnerability on from the respondent on their judiciousness and their independence on this particular point. But I think that the generic quote at the end that says she has failed to find a single case where there is a benefit of it in any of the research, that's helps build a general consensus on the idea that you're talking about and moves in that direction. I do think you need to be a little bit careful about conflating child abuse with the corporal punishment that you're talking about, although some of the people that you were quoting might not distinguish them. The 125,000 kids that you say that require injury, that doesn't sound like somebody who got spanked. That sounds like somebody who got beat, and that's a little bit different. And the notion that this is a result of somebody being carried away, that, I think, is not demonstrated in the speech. That seems like it's really an assumption that's being presented there. The other arguments I thought were fine. You explained them for the most part. They are kind of esoteric and theoretical in a couple of spots, but the premises behind them are reasonably well explained. There's just way too much reading. And, when you got the page up in front of your face, sometimes that's also a distraction, too. So you're going to have to work on your delivery issues. Although, when we get to the debates, sometimes that's the way you have to do those things. But this is not a debate, and we wanted a little bit more ethos from you. Thank you.